Hi everybody, this is Jeremy Siskin. I am the author of your books like Playing Solo Jazz Piano and like the Jazz Piano Fundamental series, which is actually, if you order these two books, they're guaranteed to swirl around like this if you order them together. That's an Amazon guarantee, that's not from me. Okay, and today I want to talk with you about one of the reasons why some jazz voicings work and some don't, why some jazz pianists might sound better than others. And this is crucial whether you play solo or whether you're playing with a band, in my opinion. And so I call this the magic range. And the rule around this magic range is that you want to keep the essential tones primarily in the magic range. So let's do a little bit of definition here. The essential tones generally mean the third and the seventh of a chord. There are some exceptions. When we have a sixth chord, like a C6, the sixth replaces the seventh. When we have a sus chord, like G sus, the fourth replaces the third. But in general, those make up the essential tones. Now, what am I calling the magic range? So I consider basically this range to be the magic range. So I'm going from the C below middle C to the G above middle C. Right, middle C is right here. So that's about an octave and a half where you have to put in the third and the seventh. So let's take some simple sample cases and then I'll show you some of the implications of this rule. So let's take a C major 7. Here our essential tones are E and B. And so if we want to play a lovely C major 7, we basically have two places where we could put that E and B. They could be right here, right? That's in the magic range. Or if we flip the third on top, they can be here. Now notice what happens. So why don't you listen just to the root of the chord down low and then the third and seventh. Or organized like this. If we go down here just slightly below the magic range, listen to how it sounds now. It's a little gritty, right? We often use the word muddy in the piano world to describe that sound where it's just a little bit too low sounding. If we go above the magic range, we don't have a disaster. But for me, if you really listen to this sound, it feels a little bit unsupported. It feels like, we need to fill some stuff in the middle. And even if we start filling stuff in, without the third and seventh quite in the right place, it never feels like a full, substantial chord, right? To me, it feels like, when you eat a meal and it's like not the right kind of nourishment, the right kind of calories, I guess, that you're looking for. That's how this feels to me. And as we go up, that problem's only going to be getting worse. Let's take another example. How about a G minor 7? Okay, so in a G minor 7th chord, B flat and F are going to be the essential tones. So we could place them here, right? That's within the magic range. And notice there's probably somebody thinking, well, that G is outside of the magic range. It's just the essential tones, just the third and seventh that need to be within the magic range. And then here, this is a little bit on the high side of the magic range, right? That F is really coming up close to that high G. So maybe it's not as beautiful as being right in the center, like this formation is. But here it still sounds okay. Again, as we go below the magic range, it sounds too low. As we get higher, it doesn't sound awful, but we're just missing the support. So a lot of what we do in traditional jazz voicings is building around this magic range. So if I'm making a one-handed voicing and I have that original C major 7 with the third and seventh, then what I'm basically going to do is I'm going to keep those two notes there and then add color around. So maybe I come up with something like this. There are certainly other options. I could add, a sharp 11. I could add the 5th. and make it thicker or thinner as I please. And one thing that I find that some jazz piano students struggle with is that we need to place this voicing in the same spot regardless of whether your left hand or your right hand is playing it. The rules of acoustics don't change depending on which hand you're using. So if I'm playing a melody, I'll probably place the voicing right in that same spot. Okay. And similarly, I see some students, when the melody gets low, they'll take this voicing and, right, if the melody's going down there, I probably want to, get out of the way, which is very fair. So they might put the voicing down there. Does that work? That totally doesn't work, right? It sounds awful. So you need to figure out a different way. If the melody's going down to a C, maybe you take off the top note. Or maybe you kind of pivot into a different position and you play the root and the two essential tones. But you can't really move your voicing around. If we're making a two-handed voicing, well, actually, before we move on to that, if I'm in this position, I'm basically going to be doing the same thing. I'm going to be adding notes around it. Maybe I'm going to add the same two notes, a D and an A. I could go a little bit below my B in order to add some colorful notes. But it's the B and the E, the two essential tones, that stay in the same place. They don't really get to move. So our traditional voicings are going to either have the third on bottom or the seventh on bottom with those notes staying in the magic range. Those are our one-handed voicings. Now, if I'm going to create a two-handed voicing, there's a few different ways to do it, but generally, the left hand takes charge of those essential tones, and the right hand adds some notes on top. Could be a lot of notes, could be a few notes. We could add some notes in between, like that. But again, we don't really move anything. We don't move that third and seventh out of the essential, out of the magic range. We keep the essential tones there and build around it. And that's where the kind of creativity and fun comes in. Now, one mistake that I see some musicians making, especially music students, is when they want to have a big chord, they move both hands up. And it feels very unsupported. So if we want to make a big chord, like imitating a big band or for a shout chorus, what we do instead is we usually play 4 notes, maybe sometimes 5, occasionally 3, keeping the essential tones in the magic range. I know I am sounding very repetitive, and then add some sort of a big chord in the upper register. But again, there's no flexibility, or very little flexibility, in terms of where those essential tones go. So if I'm playing something that's like a shout chorus, my left hand essentially isn't moving from where it usually would be. It's staying right in that same spot. Here's another scenario in which this comes up. If you're playing 4 hands piano, so, right, meaning that there's 2 pianists sitting at the piano bench. So I had a student come and we were playing 4 hands piano, and I hit the bottom and I was, playing a bass line and comping. And then he was at the top and he was playing. He's playing kind of regular voicings, but as you are probably expecting now, with the 3rd and the 7th outside of the magic range. And it just doesn't sound satisfying as comping. It sounds kind of distracting. So if you're playing 4 hands piano, oftentimes you might have to jockey over who gets to be close to the magic range. Is it going to be the right hand of the person on the bass side? Is it going to be the left hand of the person on the treble side? And if you're playing treble and your accompanist is already comping in that register, then you might just play with only one hand. If you're skilled enough, you can play, it's pretty common to play an octave. Or, use some kind of other block chord format. But stay away from comping when you're not in the correct register to comp. Lastly, solo piano is a big topic because it can be that the right hand fills in the chords, or it can be that the left hand fills in the chord, right? If you think about this logic about having these essential tones in a particular place in the piano is why we have stride piano, right? We need the bass down low, but then we need to come up to that middle register in order to grab the chords. Let me show you a specific example that I was working with recently, which I think is kind of interesting. I was working on playing a bass line for the tune Easy to Love. And when you play a bass line in the left hand, it means the right hand's going to be mostly responsible for filling in the chords. Now, what's interesting about this particular kind of assignment is that the melody for Easy to Love has a really large range, right? It gets pretty low at this D, and it gets really high for quite a while with these G's and these high E's. So, and I'll show you the keyboard here. At the beginning, it's very easy to use what I call kind of draping. In order to put my thirds and sevenths where they need to be. Right beneath the melody. Right, there's my third and seventh for G7. C major 7, I've got B and E plus a color tone. But as soon as I get, I start going up, I'm starting to get outside of that magic range. Now, is it going to be a disaster if it's a little high for a couple bars? No. But I want to start brainstorming other solutions. So, whereas I can use this draping method of essentially attaching the chords to the melody notes in the first four measures, in lines 2 and 3 here, I might take on more of a shuttle characteristic, meaning that I'm really going to move my entire hand between the melody notes, which are up high, and then the notes of the chord, which are low. Okay, so if I go from the second line, I'm going to start draping. And do you see how far I'm reaching with my right hand? Right, I could play my third and seventh there, but it's right at the top of that range, and it's not going to be nearly as supportive as going down there. Okay, so now as far as my right hand might reach, I can't get into that magic range. So I'm going to let go of that melody note. Same thing. Here I'm really high, so I have to go down. Demonstrate those first 4 bars one more time. But the basic idea is that when I'm lower, maybe on a middle B and below, my hand can kind of reach down to the middle and I can hold a note while I'm playing a chord. But as I get higher, maybe above that middle B roughly, I need to actually let go and move my hand. So here's those first 16 bars one more time. guys, I think that's it for this video. So the catchphrase to remember is to put the essential tones in the magic range. If you liked this and learned a lot, you'll probably really like playing solo jazz piano, where we talk about all kinds of different solutions for making really full, lovely sounding chords, despite the limitations of our hands. And since we were talking about magic, how about if anybody's watched all the way to the end, comment with the word Houdini, as in Harry Houdini. Have a great one, everybody.